Miami didn't cook this up in a lab. Miami just happened to be the city holding the receipt when the whole, I'm changing my number, I need to lock in with God, arc collided with a pair of yellow sneakers on a boat. Let me back up. Because that sentence only makes sense if you've been keeping tabs. And if you haven't, that's what this next stretch is for. Hit the thumbs up so the algorithm stops pretending this story isn't already trending. Tap subscribe if the receipt first thing is your speed. And turn the bell on because part 2 of this is already writing itself while I'm sitting here. Here's the frame. On or around July 25th, 2026, an eagle-eyed passenger allegedly caught Jonathan Michael Porter, the one you know as Blueface, boarding a flight to Miami. Same afternoon, Chrisean Malone, Chrisean Rock to the internet, surfaces on a boat in Miami with a guest whose face never makes the frame, but whose yellow sneakers absolutely do. Reported first through fan accounts and amplified across hot new hip-hop and the neighborhood talk. Location, Miami. Filing. None, because this isn't a court case, it's a behavioral one. And behavioral cases have their own kind of paper. A name that belongs in this frame too, though most of the coverage hasn't placed it there yet. Cash McElroy Jones, known to the industry as Whack 100, the man who has managed Blueface's career through the incarceration, the parole hearing, the release, and now through whatever this Miami stretch amounts to. According to Hot New Hip Hop, Chrisean herself once claimed Blueface only brought her on as an artist because he was bound to a bad contract and owed money to his manager. That detail sits on the desk for now. I'll pick it back up when the paper trail earns it. Now, the part one want to actually sit with, because the timing on this one is doing something. 4 days before the boat footage, Chrisean posts a note to her Instagram story. I'm going to read it the way it was written because the phrasing matters. I'm changing my number. If I'm not hitting you back or don't have my number, please don't take it personal. I gotta lock in. Everybody holding me back and needing too much from me and my heart too big to say no. I'm sorry, but I can't hear clearly from God, and I don't want my vision getting cloudy and people in my way unintentionally, but intentionally by the enemy. Archived by That Grape Juice and mirrored on multiple fan pages before the original story cycled off. Read that again. I can't hear clearly from God. People in my way intentionally by the enemy. That is not a soft goodbye. That is a woman drawing a line in cement. What makes that post heavier is what came before it. Blueface walked out of a California correctional facility on November 2nd, 2025, after serving roughly 440 days of a 4-year sentence for a probation violation tied to a 2022 Las Vegas strip club shooting per Stereogum and confirmed by BET. The next morning, he posted a statement to social media that Power 105.1 reported verbatim. Today is the end of a chapter in my family's life. Tomorrow is the beginning of a new chapter in my family's life. Can't nothing stop what's coming. That's a lot of chapter metaphors for a man who 8 months later is boarding a plane to the city where his ex is on a boat. I'm just noting that. Then there's the paternity thread, the one that makes the he's just visiting his child read harder to sustain. In March 2026, Blueface stated on his ex account per TMZ, Junior is not my biological son, RIP to his father Ronnie. That post was deleted, then reposted in different phrasing, then deleted again. The pattern of posting, pulling, reposting, and pulling again is its own kind of receipt. It tells you the words are landing somewhere he didn't expect them to land, and the cleanup is reactive, not strategic. And the RIP to his father Ronnie line refers to Karen Ronnie Hill, who was murdered in February 2025. A man Chrisean's circle, not Blueface, had publicly floated as a potential father figure in the child's life. I'm not wading into the paternity dispute. I'm noting that a man who has repeatedly and publicly disclaimed his son does not get to use that son as a passport to Miami. And then 4 days later she's on a boat with a man whose shoes match the ones her son's father was wearing in a photo shoot with his current pregnant girlfriend. That's the seam. That's where the story stops stitching. Because you don't write the enemy on Monday and split a boat rental with him on Friday, unless one of two things is true. Either the enemy language was performance, or the boat isn't what it looks like. And I want to be honest with y'all up front, I lean one direction on this, but I'm going to show my work before I get there. The receipt everybody's pointing at is the shoes. Yellow sneakers, distinctive enough that fan accounts flagged them within an hour. Same silhouette Blueface was photographed in earlier this year alongside Jaidyn Alexis, mother of 2 of his children, and as of a People confirmation earlier in 2026, expecting a third. The shoe match is what the internet is running with. And on its own, a shoe match is a Tier 3 pattern read, not a confession. 2 people can own the same sneakers. I've said that in my own comments before I say it here. But shoes aren't the only thing on the table. Chrisean's own brother, the one who runs a fairly active Instagram, posted the boat story himself. Same yellow sneakers, framed in a shot that anyone in that family would know reads as a cosign. That's not a random passenger's phone. That's family camera work. And family camera work of a man whose face is deliberately kept out of frame is a very specific choice. Hold on. Let me reread that part myself, because I want to be careful. The brother's story shows the shoes. It does not, on its own, name Blueface. What it does is publish the shoes into the record on the same day the plane's sighting drops. 2 independent posts, same city, same afternoon, same footwear. That's not one data point. That's a triangulation. Reported by all hip-hop and cross-referenced through fan archive accounts before the stories expired. 2 independent posts, same afternoon, and then a third voice enters the chat. When footage of Blueface and Chrisean surfaced online earlier this year, in what appeared to be a separate sighting on Catalina Island, Whack 100 went on a live stream and told viewers per complex, "Y'all seen that AI, right? Shit was crazy." I'm like, damn, they got to AI this end with a stroller. Blueface himself echoed the claim on the same stream. Yeah, that was AI. They put the same clothes I had on today in the AI. I had to sit with that one for a second. The AI defense is convenient. It's also the defense you deploy when the footage is real and you want a reason for it to not be. Because here's what I can't get past. Whack 100's explanation for why Blueface couldn't have been in Catalina was logistical. He argued it would have taken an hour and a half to get to Long Beach, that the boat would have been even longer. That Blueface had the baby. That's not an argument about pixels or rendering artifacts. That's an alibi built on travel time. And when your alibi is he couldn't have gotten there rather than that image is fabricated, you're not really arguing AI. You're arguing distance. Now, the Miami footage is different footage, different city, different boat, different week. But the play is the same play. When the image shows up, the response isn't "that's not him." The response is "that's not real." And I already know what the defense camp is about to type about this section, and that's fine, but if every piece of footage that surfaces of these 2 in the same frame gets labeled AI, at some point the burden shifts to the people making the claim to show their work. Show the metadata. Show the analysis. Show the forensics. Because AI is becoming a reflex, and reflexes aren't receipts. Because if you're actually locking in and hearing clearly from God, you don't do it on a boat with your ex 4 days after you publicly declared the enemy was in your circle. The timeline thickens at this point. Blueface was released November 2nd, 2025. By October 30th, 2025, 3 days before his release, Chrisean had already confirmed a new relationship with a 20-year-old rapper who goes by Top Hat 33K, telling TMZ that they hooked up the day they met. She also told TMZ that Blueface started dating her when she was 20, so she didn't see the age gap as an issue, which is a deflection that answers a question nobody asked while ignoring the question everybody is asking, which is why the pattern keeps cycling. Before Top Hat 33K, there was Hood Trophy Bino. That relationship ended in September 2025 after a 4-day stay at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas that resulted in a fine for trashing the hotel room per Hot 97. Police were called. CPS surfaced in the discourse. The relationship was over by the time the hotel bill landed. So, the chain reads like this: Hood Trophy Bino through the summer of 2025. Vegas hotel blow up in September. Split. Top Hat 33K confirmed in October. Blueface released from prison in November. 8 months of distance. Then, the changing my number post in July 2026. Then the Miami boat. The men rotate. The pattern doesn't. And I keep turning that over in my head. What does it mean when the spiritual language gets louder every time a new man enters or exits the frame? Because the Yahweh gospel pivot wasn't a side note. It was a whole public arc. In March 2025, while Blueface was still inside, Chrisean debuted a gospel single called Yahweh at Faith City Central Church in Maryland, performing it live with Tim Bowman Jr. and Faith City Music per Vibe. She told the congregation, "You can still be gangster and still follow God." The pastor said over 20 young people came to Christ during the altar call that day. That is not a low-stakes moment. That is a woman standing in front of a church full of people who believed her. And then she's on a boat with a man she told the internet was the enemy. The spiritual arc and the relationship arc aren't parallel lines. They're the same line, and they keep intersecting at the worst possible moments. If you spotted the pattern I'm tracing here, the declaration, the pivot, the relapse, the new declaration, drop where you first noticed it. Because I think most people are reading these as isolated events when they're chapters in the same book. Here's where the timing gets meaner. The day of the Miami sighting, undisputed heavyweight boxing champion Claressa Shields posts a message to Chrisean. And I'm quoting directly from a screenshot that made the rounds. "Strong women, strong personalities, stronger picture. Can't wait to train together. Sis, she coming to Atlanta August 15th for my fight too." Followed by a devil emoji directed at somebody very specifically not Chrisean. Confirmed on Claressa Shields' verified Instagram. That devil emoji has a name on it, and everybody reading the post knew it. Shields wasn't subtle. Shields was doing what a lot of women in Chrisean's orbit have been doing for 2 years, pulling her toward a version of her life that doesn't run through Blueface. And Shields did it publicly on the same 24-hour cycle that the boat footage surfaced. That is not coincidence in the lazy sense. That is one woman trying to catch another woman before she catches a flight. And the flight apparently had already landed. Pull back further, because the business infrastructure around both of these people has its own story. Complex has reported on WAC 100's dual role as both label owner and manager for Blueface, a structure that DJ Academics publicly flagged as double-dipping, where the label takes its cut and the management fee stacks on top. When the same person owns the label and manages the artist's financial ceiling gets set by one pair of hands. And Chrisean, per hot new hip-hop, has said she never signed a contract with WAC 100, which is apparently part of why the relationship between her and the management camp deteriorated the way it did. She wasn't inside the deal. She was adjacent to it, and adjacency doesn't pay the same rate. What this means for the Miami sighting is structural, not emotional. If WAC 100 controls Blueface revenue streams, and if Chrisean's own management situation post 2024 hasn't been publicly documented, and it hasn't, not in any verifiable filing I can pull, then the content cycles these two produce aren't just personal. They're commercial. Every Miami boat that trends generates engagement that translates to platform value, which translates to negotiating leverage, which translates to deal terms. I'm not saying WAC 100 scheduled the boat trip. I'm saying the infrastructure around these two has a vested interest in the boat trip existing, whether anybody scheduled it or not. Real quick, because somebody's going to say I'm being unfair to Blueface here. Let me Steelman it. Blueface has a son with Chrisean. His name is Chrisean Malone Jr., born in September 2023, and the co-parenting situation between them has been documented across TMZ and Complex as, let's call it, unstable. A father wanting to see his son isn't a scandal. A man traveling to see the mother of his child isn't automatically a betrayal of a different partner. That's the counter case, and I'll give it the respect of stating it clean. Here's why the counter case doesn't hold. Because per multiple statements from Blueface himself, archived on his own X account before some got scrubbed, he has repeatedly claimed he does not have a relationship with the son he shares with Chrisean. He has questioned paternity publicly. He has, on multiple occasions, drawn a line between his life with Jaidyn and his history with Chrisean and said the line is permanent. If the Miami trip is about the child, The child isn't in Miami. The child, per Chrisean's own recent posts, has been in Baltimore with family. So, the "he's just being a dad" defense doesn't survive its own timeline. The legal context makes that timeline even sharper. Blueface probation stemmed from a 2021 assault at a Las Vegas strip club that escalated into a shooting per Vibe. Clark County Judge Kathleen Delaney granted him probation with a suspended 2 to 5 year sentence. He violated that probation, reportedly caught with drug paraphernalia, and the suspended sentence collapsed into active time. For years, he served roughly 440 days before walking out in November 2025. That's not a footnote. That's the frame around which every public statement, every social media post, and every relationship move since his release has to be read. A man on parole carries a different set of constraints than a man without a file number. Then there's the digital trail, the one Blueface keeps laying down and picking up. The ex-post denying paternity of Chrisean Jr. wasn't the first one. He posted a similar denial in December 2023, right after the child was born, claiming he'd taken a DNA test per Complex. That post was also deleted. Then the child called him daddy on a live stream, and the denial softened. Then a new denial appeared. Then that one came down. The timeline on the paternity statements alone reads like a man testing public reaction and adjusting his position based on which way the comments blow. Post, gauge, delete, rephrase, post again. That's not conviction. That's weather vaning. Okay, I have to say something about this part specifically. I keep coming back to the fact that Chrisean Jr. is a person. Not a talking point, not a content prop, not a legal exhibit, a toddler who is going to grow up and read every single one of these posts. And the adults in the room are treating his existence as a narrative device. That's the part that sits wrong with me, regardless of which direction you read the Miami trip. Which brings me to the piece the mainstream framing keeps missing. There's a photo Chrisean posted to her own story a few days before the changing my number declaration. 2 men in the frame. She indicated interest in one of them, the one on the left, per the caption commentary that made its way onto the shade room. The post lived for less than a day before it came down. And I want to be careful here because I don't have the original archive in front of me, so I'm working from screenshots that fan accounts preserved. Tier 2 at best on that one, and I'll flag it as reported rather than confirmed. But if the photo is real and multiple accounts captured it before deletion, then the sequence reads as follows. Chrisean posts a photo signaling interest in another man. The photo comes down. Days later, Blueface is on a plane to Miami. Days after that, they're on a boat together. That's not a reconciliation arc. That's a reaction arc. That's one person publicly gesturing at moving on, and the other person showing up to make sure moving on doesn't happen. That reaction arc fits inside a larger architecture if you widen the lens. Chrisean's relationship history since Blueface incarceration has been a sequence of public pivots, each one announced, each one documented, each one consumed. Hood Trophy Beano was a public relationship. The Vegas hotel incident was public. The Top Hat 33K announcement was handed to TMZ directly, not leaked, not speculated, handed to the press as an exclusive. The gospel pivot was performed on a church stage with a camera rolling. Each of these moves generated its own engagement spike, its own comment section, its own news cycle. And every single time the cycle started to cool, something else appeared. A new man, a new song, a new spiritual declaration, a new boat. So, what does it mean when a man who told the internet your child isn't his shows up in your city 8 months after walking out of cell? It means the content calendar doesn't take breaks. And I'll be straight with y'all, I don't know who's holding the calendar. That's the question I keep circling back to. Somebody in the industry knows. Whether it's a manager, a publicist, an agent, a friend with a camera and a plan, somebody is coordinating these drops. Because the spacing is too consistent to be random. The spikes are too regular to be organic. And the third party, Jaidyn, pregnant, watching from her phone, is always positioned in the same role, the collateral. The woman who absorbs the cost of the content while generating half the engagement just by existing in the frame. I'm not going to call that love. I'm going to call it what the pattern says it is. Now, let me zoom in on one specific thing, because this is the piece I keep coming back to. The audio from the boat, Chrisean and her friend on camera, and I'm reading the exchange the way it was captured. Friend, so today will be another day of fun. What are we doing today, baby girl? Chrisean, yeah, we having fun, but I don't know what to expect because it looked like we had too much fun, and you know what that means. If you have too much fun, read that clip cold and it's nothing. Read it in context and it's a soft admission. You know what that means is the operative phrase. That is not a woman describing a girl's trip. That is a woman winking at a camera about a decision she already knows she's going to have to explain later. And she's explaining it in advance, on tape, to a friend who's also on tape, which is a very specific kind of preemptive receipt. It's the same energy as texting somebody at 2 a.m. I don't know why I'm doing this. The not knowing is a performance. You know, you're just building the plausible deniability paper trail in real time. There's a behavioral pattern underneath the audio that I haven't seen anyone name yet, and I think it's the load-bearing one. Every major inflection point in Chrisean's public life over the past 18 months has been preceded by a spiritual declaration. Before the gospel pivot, there was the September 2024 Instagram post about embracing a new life and walking in purity per vibe. Before the Top Hat 33K announcement, there was the Yahweh single release and the church performance. Before the Miami boat, there was the changing my number, locking in with God's story. The declarations aren't random. They arrive like preambles, spiritual framing laid down before the next move lands, so that when the next move lands, there's already a narrative in place to contextualize it. I was seeking God, and then I stumbled. That's the arc. It's a confessional structure that doesn't require a confession. It requires a preamble and a fall, and the audience fills in the redemption themselves. I keep turning this one over, and here's where I've landed. I'm not saying the faith isn't real. I have no way to measure that, and it's not my lane. What I'm saying is that the public expression of faith follows a schedule that aligns with content cycles, and when faith and content share a calendar, the line between testimony and marketing gets blurry. That's an observation, not an accusation. But it's an observation the pattern supports. Pull the frame back. What outlets are doing with this story splits into three lanes: the gossip aggregators, the shade room, baller alert, the fan repost accounts. Their framing is circusing, which is entertaining but strategically neutral. It positions the couple as a spectacle and the audience as observers. The framing sells engagement. It doesn't take a position. The culture press, Hip Hop DX, and adjacent outlets are running it as a co-parenting complication with a Jaidyn subplot. That framing centers Blueface as the actor and treats Chrisean as reactive. It also conveniently sidesteps the changing my number, God, the enemy post from 4 days ago, because that post makes Chrisean the actor and reframes the whole story as her contradicting herself. The Blueface defense camp on X, their framing is that Chrisean is manipulating the narrative for attention and Blueface is being unfairly dragged into a photo op he didn't consent to. That framing requires you to ignore the fact that the man got on a plane. Nobody teleported him to Miami. He bought a ticket, or somebody bought one for him, and he boarded it. Agency is not something you can spin your way out of when the evidence is a boarding pass. There are two more lanes that haven't been named, and they matter because they're pulling the story in opposite directions. Lane 4, the boxing and sports press. Chrisean's professional boxing debut on April 25, 2026 at Harrah's Philadelphia ended in a split decision win over Zenith Zion, per Yahoo Sports and Bloody Elbow. She's targeting a second fight on September 19, 2026, and she's been training with Adrian Broner on Kick livestreams. The sports framing treats her as an athlete on the come-up, disciplined, focused, rewriting her narrative through physical achievement. That framing has no room for a Miami boat with her ex. It actively contradicts the arc. And yet here we are, 3 weeks before Claressa Shields' August 15th fight that Chrisean was publicly invited to, And the conversation isn't about her training. It's about yellow sneakers, the gospel and faith community. Faith City Central hasn't publicly addressed the Miami footage. The Yahweh performance is still on YouTube. The altar call where 20 people came forward is still in the record. But the faith community's silence is itself a framing choice. It's the same strategic quiet that outlets deploy when a story doesn't serve the narrative they've invested in. When the redemption story stumbles, the church doesn't issue a press release. It just goes quiet. And quiet is a position. The framing that nobody is running, and this is where I want to land, is the one where both of them are executing the same play from opposite sides. Chrisean posts spiritual language about locking in. Blueface books a flight. Chrisean posts a photo hinting at another man. Blueface shows up. Chrisean puts a friend on camera to narrate the trip as ambiguous fun. Blueface keeps his face out of frame while his shoes stay in every shot. That is not two people accidentally colliding in Miami. That is two people running a coordinated content cycle where both of them get exactly what they need. She gets the attention spike, he gets the reminder that he can still pull up whenever he wants, and Jaidyn gets to sit at home pregnant watching it all happen on her phone. One more counter-narrative I haven't steelmaned yet, the AI defense, the one whack 100 already teed up. The argument goes, footage can be faked, deepfakes are getting better by the month, and the shoe match is a visual overlap that AI can generate from a reference photo. Blueface's own claim was that they put the same clothes I had on today in the AI. That's a specific, technical-sounding rebuttal. It deserves to be taken seriously. Here's why it doesn't hold. The Miami footage isn't a single still image. It's a sequence, the brothers' Instagram story, the plane's sighting from a separate passenger, the boat footage with audio, 3 separate captures from 3 separate sources across one afternoon. AI fabrication of a single image is plausible. Coordinated AI fabrication across 3 independent captures, including a live audio clip with Chrisean's recognizable voice pattern, is a different category of claim entirely. And whack 100's own defense wasn't "this is fabricated," it was "he couldn't have gotten there in time." That's a logistical argument, not a technical one. You don't give a travel time alibi for a deep fake. You give a travel time alibi for a real event you want to explain away. The AI claim is a shield. The alibi is the tell. That's not a love story. That's a business. And I don't say that to be cold. I say it because when you watch this specific pattern, the declaration, the deletion, the flight, the boat, the ambiguous audio confessional, the shoe reveal from a family member's account, you're not watching 2 people falling back into each other. You're watching 2 people who have figured out that their brand runs on this. Every reconciliation is a content quarter. Every breakup is a content quarter. The engagement doesn't care which one is happening. The engagement only cares that something is happening. The receipts I've added to the folder make that read harder to dismiss. The paternity denials, posted, deleted, reposted, deleted again, aren't the behavior of a man who has a fixed position on his child. They're the behavior of a man who has a fixed position on his audience. The post-prison statement about chapters in his family's life landed in November, and by July he's on a plane to Miami. Either the chapter changed in 8 months, or the chapter metaphor was never about family at all, it was about narrative resets. You can call new chapter as many times as you want. The plot doesn't change just because you turn the page. When the Yahweh performance happened live in a church with an altar call, it wasn't a private spiritual moment. It was a public event with cameras and a press cycle. And the changing my number post wasn't a private spiritual moment either. It was an Instagram story designed to be screenshotted, archived, and discussed. When the sacred and the scheduled share the same platform, the sacred stops being sacred and starts being content. That sounds harsh. I know it does. But I'm thinking out loud here, and what I keep arriving at is that the distance between testimony and marketing in this specific case is measured in weeks, not in intent. The intent could be genuine. The execution is indistinguishable from a campaign. Jaidyn is the third rail nobody in the press wants to grab. The Shade Room will post the boat photos. Hip Hop DX will write the co-parenting analysis. Nobody writes the piece about the pregnant woman at home whose partner is on a boat with his ex while she's carrying his child. That's the story that doesn't get clicks because it doesn't have sneakers in it. It just has a person sitting with a phone and a due date. Somebody's going to push back on me here and say I'm being too cynical, that these are two young people with a real history and a real child and real feelings that don't fit into a spreadsheet. Fair. I hear that. And I'll hedge, I don't have their phones. I don't have their texts. I could be reading choreography where there's just chaos. But when the chaos happens on a predictable cycle and produces predictable spikes and always involves the same third party, Jaidyn, pregnant, publicly, the burden of proof shifts. At some point, they just can't help themselves, stops being an explanation, and starts being an excuse. And I'll add this. The mainstream read on Chrisean specifically has been shaped by outlets that have a vested interest in not calling the pattern what it is. When Complex publishes whack 100's AI claim without independently verifying it, that's not journalism, that's transcription. When TMZ runs the Top Hat 33K story as a cute meet cute instead of asking why another relationship is being launched while the previous one's hotel fine is still making rounds, that's not analysis. That's a press release with a TMZ logo on it. The mainstream frame treats Chrisean as a character in a show, the wild one, the spiritual one, the chaotic one, and treats Blueface as the straight man who keeps getting pulled back in. But the receipts I've been tracing say the opposite. He's not getting pulled back in. He's showing up. There's a difference, and the difference is agency. Some of the jabs land softer than others, and I'll cop to that. There's a version of this where Blueface genuinely misses the mother of his child and acted on impulse. There's a version where Chrisean genuinely sought God and genuinely stumbled. I can't rule those out, but I can count, and the count says this is the fourth public cycle in 18 months, each one with the same structure, each one with the same cast, each one with the same pregnant third party watching from phone. For data points isn't a pattern. It's a formula. Here's the part one want the comments to actually chew on. Somebody in the industry knows what management structure Chrisean is currently under. She left one situation in 2024 per Rolling Stone reporting from that fall. Whatever she's operating under now hasn't been publicly documented in a way I can verify. If you know, drop it, because the timing of these content cycles feels like they're happening on a calendar, and calendars usually have somebody holding the pen. So, what happens from here? The likely landing is a soft walk back within 72 hours. Chrisean posts something oblique about growth or God, or being misunderstood. Blueface says nothing on the record but likes a post from Jaidyn or reposts something involving their kids. The story cools. The engagement stays. Everybody wins except the pregnant woman at home. Watch how fast the I was never with him reframe drops if Jaidyn goes public first. And don't be shocked when the walkback includes a new music drop or a boxing training clip, something that converts the engagement spike into a commercial action. The content cycle doesn't waste its own heat. If Chrisean's second fight is targeting September 19th per Yahoo Sports, then the Miami boat is free press for an athlete who benefits from eyes on her camp. The walkback won't be a retreat. It'll be a redirect. Once the narrative cools, the next drop will arrive within the same 2-week window these cycles always operate in, and the drop will be monetizable, a song, a fight promo, a brand post, something that turns the boat into a funnel. The wild card is Claressa Shields not letting it slide. Shields put her name on a public message telling Chrisean to lock in. If Chrisean doesn't show up to that August 15th Atlanta fight or shows up in a way that reads as performative, Shields is not the kind of figure who forgets. Don't be surprised if the next chapter of this involves a very direct conversation from a very undefeated champion, and don't be surprised if that conversation happens somewhere the cameras can see it. By the next window, expect Shields to distance herself publicly if the Miami pattern continues, and watch how fast the boxing community pulls its endorsement of Chrisean's athletic arc if the content cycles keep overshadowing the training camp. Shields built her brand on discipline and consistency. She doesn't co-sign chaos. If Chrisean shows up to the August 15th fight in Atlanta, but arrives in a context that reads as more spectacle than sport, the invitation to train together will cool. The boxing press, which has been the one lane treating Chrisean as a serious athlete, will pivot. Once that pivot happens, a redemption through sport narrative collapses, and what's left is the gossip lane, which is where the engagement is highest and the stakes are lowest. The residue, and this is the one that outlasts the news cycle, is what this does to the kids. Chrisean Jr. is going to grow up and read every single one of these posts. The archive doesn't disappear. The screenshots don't disappear. The boat footage doesn't disappear. Jaidyn's kids are going to read them too. Once the dust settles on whether this specific Miami trip meant anything, the paper trail these two are building for the next generation is going to be its own separate reckoning. And no amount of "we were young" is going to soften a Wayback Machine capture. And the next decade will test that in ways the current discourse isn't preparing for. Chrisean Jr. has already been the subject of a paternity denial posted to a public X account with millions of followers. He's already been referenced in a deleted tweet that named a dead man as his potential father. He's already been the justification for a plane ticket that may or may not have been about him at all. The archive of those posts exists in cache form across multiple platforms. Wayback, archive.today, fan account backups, screenshot compilations. The child's entire origin story is documented in a content cycle he had no say in. By the time he's old enough to read, the receipts will be older than he is, and they'll still be searchable. That's the 5-year aftershock. Not a lawsuit, not a custody battle. A kid typing his own name into a search bar and finding out his parents turned his birth into a content quarter. All right, loop back to what I opened with. Miami didn't cook this up. Miami just held the receipt. The receipt this time is a pair of yellow sneakers on a boat 4 days after a woman told the internet she was locking in with God. If that's locking in, I don't know what checking out looks like. Drop where you land in the comments. Tell me if I'm reading this too hard or not hard enough. And if you got a receipt the research desk hasn't seen yet, the inbox is open, like this one, so the algorithm stops burying it. Subscribe if you rock with the receipt first thing. Hit the bell so part 2 doesn't get lost in your feed. Next case is already loading.